Welcome back. Now, South Africa has a long-standing bilateral political and economic relationship with Ireland, and this dates back to 30 years ago, as supposed in the new dispensation, and also, looking at Ireland being the leading import and export partner, South Africa rather being the leading import and export partner for Ireland on the African continent. And for the 5-year period between 2018 until 2022, total trade between the two countries increased from 9.2 billion to 10.5 billion rand. And this, of course, also accompanied by a positive annual average growth rate of 3.1%. Now, the two countries also have a shared history, which included the strong support from the Irish Anti-Apartheid Movement for South Africa's struggle for freedom. And many South Africans, including most famously, I suppose, former Minister Kader Asmal, who found refuge in Ireland. So to tell us more about, this relationship and, of course, just the bilateral between our two countries, we joined here in studio by Her Excellency Fionnuala Gilsenan, who's the Irish ambassador to South Africa. And thank you so much, Ambassador, for speaking to us this morning.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for the invite.
And on your final day, you leave tonight.
Exactly.
So let me start with asking you about your tenure as ambassador to South Africa and how that's been.
Well, look, it's been really wonderful. I mean, it's a real privilege, I think, to serve in South Africa in particular. For an Irish ambassador, because we have such a strong relationship. But it's been a strange period, we all know that. I came towards the end of 2019, and shortly after arriving, we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So there's always a little bit of a feeling of having missed out, because we were locked down and
you were cheated out of a few years.
You feel like you're cheated. But you are and you aren't, because you're still living through an extraordinarily historic period, and you're watching how the country, how the people, how the government is dealing with a crisis. And you're also part of that, because you also have your own country, men and women who are in crisis, who need to travel out of South Africa. So it was a little bit, you feel a little bit cheated, but at the same time, it was quite challenging, and from that point of view, very interesting. But then once we opened up, it was a case of, okay, let's put the foot on the accelerator and do a number of interesting things. And I think we managed to do that. We launched a tech challenge for young entrepreneurs, to connect with young entrepreneurs in Ireland. And I think that's going to be a great programme going forward for the next few years.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, because I had read up a little bit on it, and I thought this was such a fabulous initiative, especially taking township enterprises, for example, and creating that link. So if we can maybe just talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of South Africans know Ireland. They know the Anti-Apartheid Movement. They know about Kader Asmal. Missionaries worked in South Africa, and so many people's parents and grandparents perhaps were thought by Irish missionaries. But Ireland has changed enormously in the last number of decades, and it's now a very highly developed economy. It has a lot of tech enterprises, huge numbers of multinationals, ones you would all know well. Facebook, Google, Apple have invested in Ireland. So we have a big ecosystem that has developed over the last number of years. And so when I came to South Africa, I had this strong sense that we needed to share that aspect of Ireland with South Africa. And then when you're here as an outsider, one of the things that really strikes you is the energy and enthusiasm and creativity of the youth of South Africa. So I wanted to make that connection between young South Africans and young Irish entrepreneurs. And so we piloted the programme last year. It was a huge success, and now we'll move forward. In fact, we've just engaged with the Incubation Innovation Hub in Wits University in a partnership. So they're going to work with us and Dogpatch Labs in Ireland, which is kind of their equivalent, to make these connections around innovation, around technology, and making connections between young people who are involved in entrepreneurship. So yeah, it's a very exciting programme, and I think it just starts a new set of connections between our two countries.
It certainly does, and I think, you know, given the global world that we live in now, this is so important, and especially getting young people to connect. And then you touched on, you know, the anti-apartheid movement, Kader Asmal, who found a home in Ireland, yes, where he lectured. He was there for how long? About 27 years or something, for quite a long time. And that, of course, also links our two countries very strongly. You also have, you know, a master's program,
yes,
for South African students. And yes, I'm always interested in those sort of opportunities for our young people as well.
Yeah, I mean, part of, I think, just commemorating the contribution that Kader Asmal made in Ireland, both to the anti-apartheid movement, making it a very strong movement, and it was very influential within the EU, and also his own contribution in Ireland to our civil liberties. He was a very active citizen, if you like, in Ireland before he returned to South Africa. So we named our fellowship programme after him as a way of commemorating his legacy, and it is very focused on young black South Africans, young black women in particular. So it very strongly focuses on young people from traditionally disadvantaged backgrounds, and maybe people who don't think to themselves, oh, I could go and do a master's in Ireland or in Europe or somewhere else. So we really go out and intentionally target those young people from universities that perhaps wouldn't normally think, I want to study a master's, or I'm the person who might be able to do that. So we have at least 12 students from South Africa every year who go to Ireland to study at master's level under that programme. And in fact, we have now so many students that have done, I think we've just over 100 now, that we have a very strong alumni organisation in South Africa, which, you know, is full of people who have a sense of wanting to make a contribution to South Africa, wanting to exercise leadership, and wanting to be really creative and dynamic leaders in their own communities. So it's a really good programme, I feel.
And you know, I'm particularly interested, maybe at some point, to get further details on that, just to, you know, give a sense to those who may be looking to further their studies, who may not know how.
Well, I refer them to our Facebook page and our Twitter pages for information on that, because we are also, you know, really trying to get the word out. So this is a great opportunity to alert people to it, but certainly information on our website as well. So it'd be very welcome to.
Absolutely fabulous. And then, of course, there's the JCC, the South Africa Ireland Joint Commission for Cooperation. How's that been, you know, during your tenure? Because we talk a lot about, you know, our bilateral relations, but, you know, if you look at it, are you satisfied with where it's at? How much more can we improve on that, or what can be done differently in terms of the areas where we do have that cooperation?
Yeah. I mean, and our bilateral relations have traditionally been very strong, and I think that that's because there's a kind of a natural sympathy between Ireland and South Africa, and a lot of that has to do with our political heritage, you know, the fact that Ireland was colonised. South Africa feels that we are more sympathetic, and I think that that's true. I mean, I think that there's more of an empathy from Ireland when it comes to engaging with South Africa and engaging with the kind of challenges that South Africa is facing at the moment. Probably because we've also faced those challenges ourselves when we were trying to build a new state in the post-liberation era. So I find in our bilateral relations there's a lot of very open conversation. So we don't find ourselves in a situation where maybe we're making a point and the other side are making a point and we're kind of talking past each other. And I think that's very valued. The other thing that's a huge contribution to the strength of the relationship is the contribution that President Ramaphosa has made to the Northern Ireland peace process. You're probably aware that Northern Ireland leaders came to South Africa in 1996, and they, you know, very much brought there by Rolf Mayer and Cyril Ramaphosa. They met Nelson Mandela, and I think they were really challenged to say, you know, you're a small part of a small island, small number of people. We've managed to, you know, resolve some very, very difficult issues here and move through to a democratic period. And they challenged them very much around their own willingness to move forward. And that was made a big contribution to the Northern Ireland peace process. And then in turn, when we needed people to come in for the arms decommissioning process in Ireland, President Ramaphosa, who was then not in active politics, was the person who was requested and volunteered to come in. So when we have conversations then, you will say in the present day, about conflict, about peace and security on the continent of Africa, we both know that we're speaking from a place of experience, and we both have a bit of humility around what can be done, the complexity of what we're dealing with, and trying to really work through the problem and find solutions. So those kinds of conversations that we have at the bilateral level, I have to say, are very constructive, and we don't always agree. But we disagree in a very positive and respectful way.
And I think that's the only way to really get around it. But of course, today being your last day, and you know, we're running out of time, just your parting shot to South Africa, Ambassador Gilsenan. You know, what are you going to miss about us, and you know, what's the word that you'd like to leave us with?
I mean, the thing that you always miss when you do this job, and every 4 years you leave, either you leave home or you leave the place you've been. So what you miss the people, because you build up relationships with people, with your work colleagues, with contacts who become friends, and it's a big wrench actually to leave. It really is. And then if I was to give a parting shot to South Africa, I mean, I think that you're entering into a really challenging period. If I look back at Ireland 30 years after independence, we were really downbeat, and there were a lot of people asking, was it worth it? Should we really have sought independence? Is this project actually working? And I think because we asked ourselves those very stark questions, it meant that we really shifted in the way in which we were managing the country. And you know, particularly looking at how we build an economic future that includes everybody. We had at that time, people were just leaving the country in their thousands in the 1950s and 60s. We had a really tiny population. We were down to 2.1 million from a 10 million a century prior to that. And it's, I think, that stark moment where you think either we make this work, or really everything that people sacrificed before is for nothing. And I think that South Africa is at that point as well, that people have to really say, this is the time that we need to make some deep changes to build a society and economy that includes everybody.
Well, Ambassador, thank you so much for your time, for your service, and for, you know, being here in South Africa, and we wish you well in your future endeavors. That was Ambassador Fionnuala Gilsenan, the Irish ambassador to South Africa, talking to us about bilateral relations between South Africa and Ireland. And of course, this is her final day in the country. She jets out tonight.